Hi all, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Sam Gregory. I'm a student here who's currently doing his PhD with Leeds Beckett University, and I'm also embedded within the grammar school at Leeds, outlining those things that Gabe just alluded to there. First of all, I think it's really good today that we've all come together in relation to PE to have this conversation around certain topics in PE, because it's really, really important moving forward. So I'd like to thank both Kevin and Fionn for facilitating this partnership in relation to this, because it's a really important thing that we do as the university to try and connect towards each other. So the presentation of today, context, context, and context. So you can probably take a guess of what it's about today then, okay? And this has been developed from a proposed study to evaluate the enactments of the primary physical education policy within a UK independent school. So the aim of this presentation then is to give an outline of what this study might entail and the rationale and thought behind why this study, or this particular study, is important, not just for my context, but for other contexts as well. So, the rationale. So why context? We know within the profile schools over the past 10 years that there's been a significant shift in relation to the pupil profile. So this might be in regards to diversity, this might be in relation to socioeconomic statuses, and this might be in relation to gender as well. If we look further afield towards physical education and physical activity, we know now that there are lower levels of movement competence levels amongst primary school pupils transitioning into senior schools. This has direct implications upon lowering levels of physical fitness, increased risk to mental health and physical health issues, and therefore this contributes to lowering rates of sport participation and physical activity. This is further corroborated by the World Health Organization, who found that 80% of school-going children do not meet the daily guideline of 60 minutes per day of physical activity. So why policy? So within this then, and within our space, schools have been identified as key facilitators in relation to developing movement competence, and in particular physical education. Now we think of in some of our contexts, PE is the only opportunity that some of these pupils will get to enhance their movement competence. And again, if we look at the field in relation to how PE is constructed, so we've looked from the independent sector, whereby we're maybe not guided through national curriculum policy documents, we have a bit more autonomy of what we can do. Or if we even look within the state sector in relation to the primary or the senior school PE curriculum, it's only comprised of about two pages each respectively. So my thought there, my challenge there is actually within our space within PE, we can actually be quite innovative and creative within the approaches that we take to try and address some of the issues that have been outlined today. So I'd just like to draw your attention to this quote here then. Context precedes policy. I'd just like you to take a moment, just think about what does this mean and how do you interpret this whilst you reflect upon your own context. By the end of this presentation, I hope to give a clearer picture as to why this quote is so important and how you can use this quote to think a little bit deeper into your context and how we can make this appropriate for our particular context. Breaking that quote down just a little bit further, then, some of the key definitions then are context. Now, historically, context within education and physical education hasn't been the centre of much research. So, historically, the generic definition for context is it sets a background and it sets the scene to how real drama unfolds in the subsequent accounts of particular people and events also. More of us are more familiar with the term policy. Now, if we're from a state school perspective, education policy is appropriated by the central state, so it's governed by the Department for Education. And their aim is to try to control, manage and transform society and to try and modernise education and to raise standards. However, in recent times, what has begun to happen is this development of understanding context and policy to particular schools and particular individual profiles as well. And this is started to align with most recent research from around 2010 in relation to some of the theoretical frameworks that have been developed in relation to these two key terms. So the first theoretical framework that I'd like to guide you to is the contextual dimensions. Now, the contextual dimensions influences how policy is developed or how it's understood within our particular context. So you're sat here today, you're from a particular context. It is then subsequently influenced by the situated dimensions, so your pupil profile, your locality and your setting. The second dimension is the material dimension. So this is guided again by the facilities that you have in place, the budget that you have in place and the staff as well within your school. The professional aspect, or the professional dimension, is in relation to the historical values or the historical approaches that your school may have taken in developing policy or how it's understood. Furthermore, this is also constructed by current individuals within the school and their values, their experiences and their motivations as well. And the final one then relates to the external dimension. So what external accountability measures or what monitoring process is going on from the outside of your context that then interprets or influences how your policy is created or then influenced within your context. Now, speaking from a state school perspective, you're guided by Ofsted. So the question might arise then, is your context preceding policy or is policy preceding context? The second theoretical framework that I'd like to put towards you then is in relation to policy actors. So policy actors are individuals within your context, so for example within PE, who then subsequently understand that policy and then translate it into their practices. So for example, you've got an outsider who's someone who's not attached to your context but may influence how your policy is developed and then how it's interpreted within your context. The narrator, for example, so from a state school perspective, you've got the National Curriculum Policy document. So the narrator might be a director of sport, it might be a PE coordinator, and you set meaning to that policy document in relation to your context. Okay, so you're the ones in charge of setting that meaning. The entrepreneurs then are the ones who message your meaning in relation to your context. So how do they symbolize what you have created for your meaning? So is that through display walls? Is that through CPD workshops? Is that through working one-to-one with staff? Or is that schemes of work? Similar with the enthusiast then, this is someone in your school, in your context, who may look to others in relation to try and get them on board in what you're trying to message and try and do within your vicinity. And the final one then is a receiver. So this might be an ECT, no disrespect, or a TA, for example, who is at the start of their journey and they're looking for further guidance and assistance in relation to how to understand the policy within your context, to then how they can actually put that into practice in relation to the context that you're working within. So let's break it down some more and let's make it a little bit more personal. All of us here are working in different contexts. All of us here have probably worked in a variety of different contexts, or even if we've worked in a context for a prolonged period of time, that context has probably changed. Within your own personal growth, you've probably taken on different roles or multiple roles that have just been alluded to in relation to policy actors. So let's look at my personal journey. I started off as a PE apprentice, so very much when I was working within a couple of schools from a primary perspective, I was a receiver. I was looking for the guidance in relation to how to interpret, firstly, the National PE Curriculum Policy document, but then how could I interpret that and how can I put that into practice to the relevant context that I was working within. As I progressed, I moved on towards being a PE coordinator, so I became more of an enthusiast and an entrepreneur. So I was creating schemes of work, displays, CPD workshops for staff, and trying to get other staff on board in relation to understand that PE was a really important aspect of a child's life in relation to their development. As I progressed through my academic career as well, my knowledge started to grow, and I took on more of a role as a consulting role for a couple of schools. So I took on two roles here. I was an outsider and I was a narrator in relation to the fact that I was the one who was setting meaning to the National Curriculum PE policy document and then tailoring it to the needs of specific contexts and then subsequently influencing how that was then interpreted and practiced within specific contexts. So, what is the importance of understanding context and why does it relate to my first study or my proposed study of evaluating the enactment of primary physical education policy? So, we've got two theoretical frameworks. We've got contextual dimensions and we've got policy actors. My job is to interview key individuals in relation to the contextual dimensions of the independent school that I'm working within. To firstly understand how the context influences the development of policy in relation to PE, and then subsequently how that's interpreted. I'm also interested within the roles that those individuals take as policy actors. So what are the different roles in relation to PE, especially within the primary school vicinity? This then feeds into this bigger picture, or this comprehensive picture of something called enactments. So what is enactments and how do we define enactments? So enactments is comprised of both these two key theoretical frameworks. So the first notion is interpretations. So the individual meaning and understanding of policy from the policy actors. And this may be influenced by the contextual dimensions. Secondly, we've got the translation. So those interpretations then, how are they physically played out into practice? How are they then messaged through artifacts or visual data within the school? So questions there could arise whether or not is what's in the policy aligned to what's physically being done by yourself or actually all your staff members as well? So are you aligned or misaligned on what you're trying to achieve? So the challenge then that I may come across in facing this first study is that I need to understand the contextual dimensions. So what is influencing the development of policy within the school and how that's understood. The second challenge is to then understand the policy actors and their roles that then feeds into individual interpretations and translations. And this forms a triangulation of data in relation to the fact that I'm trying to understand the evaluation of the enactment of physical education policy within an independent school. So what next? What do I do with this data? So to start with, I need to take an interpretive lens from a researcher perspective in relation to the fact that I'm trying to create meaning in relation to physical education policy from a primary school perspective. That means I'm trying to make sense of things from daily practices, experiences, motivations, and personal understandings as well, and putting that all together. Moving forward then, to try and articulate this data, I'll take more of a critical lens, okay? And that's not to bash what's the current provision, what's in place at the moment, that's to enhance what's going on at the moment. So from the school's perspective then, what is going on? Does it align with the school's policy document? Does it align with the context of what we're trying to achieve? And further afield in relation to what Alan and what Professor Dave Morley will allude to, is it addressing global and national concerns of these lower levels of movement competence from relation to a primary school perspective? So I want to leave you with this quote, context precedes policy again, but I want to attach some key questions to this and just leave it for food for thought just as we finish up this presentation. So do your interpretations and translations reflect the PE policy in your context? Now, I'm not just asking it from your personal perspective, but think about your department. Is what's going on in your department, is it aligned and is it reflective of that policy that's in your context? Is the policy in place actually appropriate for your context? And are enactments addressing concerns within your school or further afield that's been related to both in this presentation and the one before as well? Thank you for your time for today's presentation. I'll open the floor to any questions if anyone's got some. Thank you.
Any questions?
It's because we're so good, Sam.
No, I don't say that.
Well, Sam, it might be worthwhile giving context is the relevant word to your presentation, just to talk through in real layman's terms some of the actual things you've done so far to bring your PhD to life at the school, because Sam is doing a terrific job with us, but actually there's a, even for a layman like me, some of those words can be quite academic. So Sam, will you just break it down into some of the actual things you've been doing at GSAL?
So it's part of my embedded nature and the journey of the PhD. So basically, to understand the context will then feed into the second study. And the movement is that we're trying to create a PE curriculum that's based around movement competency. So we want to improve the levels of movement competence from primary level that feeds in then to the senior school. So my first job then is to really understand what is currently going on with primary in the primary school PE curriculum. Is what's going on, is it aligned to the policy document or the vision that's in place? Yes or no? And are those key stakeholders aligned in relation to how they're delivering upon that, against the policy? Now, from that data, like I said before, what I can then do is start to understand whether or not what's going on is effective or how we can further enhance the provision that's in place within the school. I think really importantly, in relation to the embedded nature of GSAL and how we're looking to work, is that I'm not just simply there telling GSAL what to do. It's very much an open conversation. It's a co-creation approach. So even with the data that's collected, it will be presented back to the key stakeholders from GSAL, and it'll be a collaborative approach of how we can actually enhance the provision that's going on, rather than me just saying, this is what we need to do. No, actually, because those individuals in the school have got a range of experiences and a range of expertise in many different areas, which are really important because they actually understand the context of which I'm working in as well. So that's the aim of the PhD overall, and hopefully get some evaluation of how effective that curriculum will be in relation to things like movement competence, physical fitness, and some perceived competence as well.
And then really, even in more layman terms, and that was a good answer, Sam, is that Sam has spoken to heads of PE, primary teachers, senior school teachers, head of senior school PE, Kev, who works particularly in year 6 to year 7 to make sure, because all the pupils from year 6 trying to but Sam has spoken to the head, he's spoken to the deputy head, he's spoken to the overall exec principal, he's connected with loads of stakeholders, and that's been really important for this to work. And in practical terms, it might mean we tweak our HRF model next year, which is the health benefits block of work. We've incorporated dance from year one up. That's been relatively easy. So there's lots of small tweaks practically that a PE teacher can do to support Sam's work. So it's not, so the changes are little and often, and then he finishes his PhD, and there might be things to do from there, but I think you'll see change and success in his journey throughout his PhD. So he's doing a good job.
Well done, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
Cheers.